Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing here, going over the week's biggest fights involving the biggest fighters and handing out some fighter grades. And as always, I'm always curious to know what you guys thought of the fighters as well as some of your own grades, so you can leave those down in the comments. Would love to see them all. A very, very, very interesting week of fights, to say the very least. Some controversy, some upsets, some title changes. Anything you're looking for this weekend, you had in terms of the fights that you were given. A little bit of everything. Makes it fun, to say the very least. Going to be quite a few fighters to talk about here, though, so let's not, stick with this rambling here. Let's get into these grades. First fighter we're going to look at here is Josh Taylor. Now, he technically defeated Jack Catterall via 12-round split decision, defending his World Junior welterweight titles in the process, and the grade that I'm going to go with here is a D-. To be honest, I thought he was going to be the first F I've actually handed out in this series, but the one thing I'll give him is that he did fight back and tried to make changes in the fight, whether he was successful or not. That being said, nothing looked good. Yes, he lost in most people's minds, but because he got the win, he's going to have plenty of resentment his way from sort of impartial fans. He didn't win, in my opinion, so he obviously looked less than he certainly could have. And to be perfectly honest, he just did not look good in regards to the sort of defensive movements of Jack Catterall. He just couldn't get away from certain shots. At this point now, he's kind of a man with no island as well. He wants to move up to 147, but if he can't take Jack Catterall's punches, and he's also, at this point looking like a fighter who has had certainly the weakest performance of his career, certainly at the top of the sport, it's going to become a question of how well would he fare against some of those absolute killers at 147 pounds. How well could he really do? Just not a good performance overall, and the perception of him as a fighter has greatly taken a hit, and as a result of that, he gets the grade he gets. Now, the second fighter we're going to go with here is Jack Catterall, who lost to Josh Taylor by a 12-round split decision. Officially, most people would argue that he won the fight. This, of course, was for the same championship belts that Taylor still possesses now, and the grade I'm going to be giving Catterall here is an A-. To be honest, he did everything right with maybe the exception of closing the show out stronger, which is really the only area where I marked him. He showed all his strengths, boxing. He even showed a little bit of power in dropping Taylor. He showed some poise in a big moment, the biggest moment of his career. He also had this ability to kind of take whatever Taylor was giving him. Another reason Taylor gets such a bad mark earlier is because he was talking such a big game before this fight, while on the flip side of that, Catterall didn't let any of that affect him. He went in there and still performed exceptionally, and that is, of course, going to reflect in his marking as well. Now, again, this is unfortunate for him because this is never going to be a good thing getting jobbed. But on the plus side, he has made a name for himself that, while sort of a consolatory prize at this point, certainly is going to propel him into a different point in his career. He's a known fighter at this point, especially at 140 pounds. Now with, Teofimo Lopez moving up, and you have fighters like Josh Taylor moving out, there are certainly some new interesting opportunities there that could definitely, even the Regis Pro Grey fight, there are opportunities there for interesting performances for Catterall going forward. He just needs to stay in the mix and kind of build off of this performance, regardless, as it pertains to this fight. I couldn't see how he got anything less than an A-, and that's the grade he gets. Third fighter we're going to go with here is Hector Garcia, who defeated Chris Colbert versus 12-round unanimous decision in the junior lightweight division. The grade I'm going with here is an A-. You're a late replacement, not a big name, don't have really any major backing, and you're fully expected to lose. And you dominate. I really don't see how you get much less of a grade than that. It's hard to give anything but an A. It's such a breakout win. Didn't get overwhelmed by the moment, didn't let any of the sort of, the kind of showboating or talk of Chris Colbert do anything to him. He simply went in there and did what he was supposed to do. Didn't get overwhelmed by the moment. Considering the fact that he was also poised but also stuck to his game plan and really laid it on him, but showed some skill in there too and some good inside fighting. It was just an overall dominant performance, and I really don't see how you could give him much less of a grade than that. And yeah, it's going to be a breakout for him, and it'll be interesting to see what he does going forward. Fighter number 4 we're going to go with here is Chris Colbert himself, who had a loss to Hector Garcia via 12-round unanimous decision, as mentioned. The grade I'm going with is an F. This is the first F that I've handed out. Now, I will say right at the front here that I did question giving him the F only because he did take the loss like a man, the way a lot of fight fans want to see fighters take fights, and losses specifically. However, that's not necessarily a sort of indication as to how he fought. His performance was an F. It was a really bad performance. Only one that really tops Taylor on the weekend to some degree. That's again because at least Taylor tried to adapt. Even worse, he seemed keen to just survive. That's the issue. It wasn't that he was getting beaten up and, he was just behind on his counters and, just a tick behind in terms of his reflexes and just seemed flat overall. He just didn't really seem all that interested in trying to win the fight. And by the last 2, 3 rounds, he seemed willing to just accept that I'm not trying to get knocked out, so let's just finish this fight. That's never going to be a good thing. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he sort of let his guard down and that the replacement opponent was kind of getting to him and he just didn't maybe take it as seriously as he should have. But that might mean something great for his next fight. In terms of this fight, it's still a horrible sign that he would allow that to happen, and I can't see him getting any grade besides the one he gets. And of course, that's why he's left with the F. Now, the fifth fighter that I'm going to go with here is Lawrence Okolie, who had a 12-round unanimous decision win over Mikkel Cieslak in the cruiserweight division, defending his WBO title in the process. And the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a B minus. Now, it wasn't a bad performance from Okolie per se, though the fight itself was pretty damn ugly. It just wasn't anything particularly special. Yes, he dropped Cieslak. He had some moments. He showed a good right hand, but he didn't dominate the fight so much as there wasn't a lot of fighting. There was a lot of holding, clinching. There was some in wrestling. Just not a lot of great boxing to watch here. When there was, he did pretty well. There just wasn't enough. And furthermore, he didn't show the sort of power that you're hoping your cruiserweights are going to have, especially ones that might want to move up to heavyweight in the not too distant future. Not the best of performances in those ways. What I will say is he seemed poised. It was yet another performance where at the very least he did come out looking to put out a performance like that, a statement, perhaps with Maurice Brady's there dressed as a Super Mario brother that inspired him to put on some sort of super performance. But whatever it was, he at least was inspired early on to try and do that. But as the fight got a little bit more haggard and a little bit more tired, you just saw that the quality overall dipped, and as a result, so did his performance. Still got the win, still looked dominant in the sense that at the very least he was never in any position to lose the fight, didn't get hit with anything major or too crazy or scary, and overall not the worst performance in the world, just not the best, and that's the mark he gets. Honorable mention here goes with Fernando Martinez, who defeated Yerwin Ngajas via 12-round unanimous decision, capturing the IBF Junior Bantamweight title in the process. Grade I would go with there is an A minus. I mean, just an all-around game, interesting fighter, and he really just upset a guy who was a pretty long reigning champion in the process and really came out of nowhere. I did not expect, again, a huge underdog, almost a 4-1 dog against a guy who is perceived to have the backing and support of his promoters. You wouldn't expect him to necessarily lose this kind of fight, but he was dominated, and certainly a fight that if it wasn't such a busy, action-packed weekend, I would put a little more time into, but definitely an interesting and inspiring title win, and it'd be interesting to see what he's going to do going forward. Would also go here with Jerwin Cajas, who had the loss to Martinez, as mentioned, and lost his title in the process. The grade I'd go with is a C minus. I'm not going to be too harsh on him. He certainly has had a long reign. He's a fighter that's getting up there a little bit in age, and I think he might have gotten even a little complacent with his position in the sport and the division, what have you. Maybe didn't get up for this fight as well as he might have otherwise. What I will also say is that he showed tremendous heart by trying to get into this fight, trying to make more out of it. It just wasn't there for him, and he got overmatched, admitting as much after the fight. So I definitely give him credit for that. Probably deserves a rematch considering how long his reign was and how much of a fight he put into it. Will be hard to see him changing much, but again, that's why the fights happen. Still, that's the grade I'd go with there. I would also go with Gary Antoine Russell, who defeated Victor Postal at a 141 catchweight. The grade I'd go with here is a B plus. He had a test to pass with Postal, to be honest. Had to endure the kind of veteran tricks and tactics, but got through them and, got ragged when he needed to, got a little more crisp and clean when he needed to, and really showed poise for a guy who's had less than 15 professional fights at that point. I mean, was clearly winning the fight and perhaps the biggest fight of his career up to this point. Do I think the stoppage was a bit premature? Probably. And it does definitely benefit Russell to have it happen at that point because he didn't really, he's on a streak of knockouts here and kept that intact at going 14-0 with 14 stoppages. So I do question how or why that would happen. Nonetheless, it was certainly a fight that he was winning and well on his way to winning. So regardless of all of that, he certainly gets a decent mark as well. And of course, I have to shout out Jordan Gill, who defeated Kareem Garfield for your ninth round KO, winning the European featherweight title in the process. And the grade I'm going with is an A plus. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Just watch the fight. You don't have to worry about anything else. That was an A plus performance. To land that shot out of nowhere with everything that he had against him, the injuries, the beaten up, the being knocked down. Seriously, watch the fight. It's an A plus just for what it is. Encapsulated in that moment is a perfect performance for what you could expect a human to be willing to withstand. So that's the grade he gets there, and that's that. In any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your grades and all that kind of stuff and what you thought of the fight, your impressions of them as well. Who do you think looked the best, the worst? Would love to hear all your thoughts on that as well. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at jonboxing@gmail.com. Also, be sure to check out jonboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. And as always, until next time.